It was 108 degrees in Kandahar that day, and the wind felt like it came straight from a hairdryer set to hell. I was sorting supply manifests in a tent that smelled like dust and diesel when the email came in. The subject line read, Mitchell Family Estate Update. I thought it was one of those automated notices from the lawyer handling Mom's trust. I opened it anyway, half distracted, still holding a clipboard. But the first line made me stop breathing for a second. Dear Captain Mitchell, we regret to inform you that under the revised will, you have been removed as a beneficiary. Please contact Amanda Green for further information. Removed, as in erased. I reread it 3 times before I finally sat down. Someone, somewhere, in Tennessee, had decided that my service overseas made me unfit to inherit my own family's property. Amanda. Of course it was Amanda. My older sister, the family's golden child, the lawyer who always said, I handle things. Apparently, she'd just handled me right out of my mother's will. Outside, I could hear the helicopters warming up, blades cutting through the air like thunder. A sergeant walked past and asked if I was okay. I told him it was nothing urgent. Because in the Army, you don't fall apart over family emails, you file it under later and move on. Still, something burned inside me. Not anger exactly. More like disbelief wrapped in exhaustion. My sister had waited until I was halfway across the world to do this. Smart move. I couldn't exactly drop everything and fly home for a family argument. That night, the guys were joking around over MREs, but I couldn't shake it off. I sat there, staring at the metal table, hearing Amanda's voice in my head. You chose the Army, Lauren. I chose to stay and take care of things. She always said, take care of things, like she owned the trademark. I thought about Mom's house, the front porch, the old oak tree, the flagpole we raised every Memorial Day. The property wasn't just money. It was proof that what my father built, and what my mother protected, still meant something. And Amanda just cut me out. The next morning, I called the law office using the satellite phone. The receptionist transferred me to someone named Mr. Hayes, who spoke like a man used to dealing with rich people who'd lost patience. He said, Yes, Captain Mitchell, your sister now holds the power of attorney for Mrs. Mitchell's estate. She assured us it's only temporary, for administrative convenience. Administrative convenience, I repeated. That's cute. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. If you want my honest opinion, ma'am, temporary never stays temporary when family's involved. I thanked him and hung up. The sound of the disconnect beep felt louder than it should have been. That night, I wrote Amanda an email. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just typed, Got your update. Impressive timing. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the lantern, and lay awake listening to the hum of the generator. In the distance, someone was playing an old country song about home. The kind that hits harder when you're 7,000 miles away from it. Around 2 a.m., a sandstorm rolled in. The tent flaps whipped violently, and everything smelled like iron and static. I watched the dust crawl under the door, thinking about how Amanda must have rehearsed this move for months. How she must have smiled when she signed my name off the paperwork. In war, you learn to read silence like a language. And my sister's silence said one thing loud and clear. You're not one of us anymore. Fine. The next morning, I put on my uniform, adjusted my patch, and looked at myself in the small mirror above the sink. I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who'd spent years following protocol, building systems, solving problems. This wasn't going to be different. It was just another mission, personal this time. A corporal came in holding mail. Captain, one more letter for you. It wasn't a legal document. It was handwritten, from Vermont. A woman named Margaret Langford had joined the Adopt a Soldier program and picked my name. She wrote, Dear Lauren, I don't know you, but thank you for what you're doing. If you ever need a reminder that kindness still exists, consider this letter one. I smiled for the first time in days. Because somewhere out there, a stranger cared more about me than my own sister did. That night, before lights out, I opened my email again and drafted one final message. This one wasn't to Amanda. It was to myself, saved in drafts, never sent. Don't mistake silence for surrender. The war's not over. The cursor blinked at the end of the line, steady and calm. I shut the laptop. If you've ever been betrayed by your own family, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear how this quiet war unfolds, make sure to subscribe, because sometimes revenge doesn't shout, it just comes home wearing a uniform. The next morning, I ordered coffee so strong it could have stripped paint off the mug. I stared at my laptop, debating whether to call her or just let the silence do the work. But silence was exactly what she wanted. So I hit dial. Amanda answered on the third ring. Lauren? Her tone had that fake surprise, like she hadn't been waiting for the call she knew was coming. Yeah, I said. I got the lawyer's email. A pause. Then the sound of her breathing through her nose, the sound of someone preparing their defense. She said, Lauren, this is temporary. You're in Afghanistan for God's sake. You chose the army. I'm just trying to keep things running here. Oh. There it was, the line she'd been polishing for months. You chose the army, like I'd chosen an enemy over her. I said, so being in uniform disqualifies me from having a family now? She laughed quietly, that lawyer's laugh. Don't be dramatic. It's just paperwork. You know how Mom gets, she needs someone here to handle things. I remember Mom being capable of signing her own name, I said. Unless that changed. That silence again. This time, heavier. I could practically hear her eyes narrow. Lauren, she said finally, you always make everything sound like a conspiracy. You left. You're halfway around the world. You can't just expect to manage a property from a war zone. You're right, I said. But I don't expect anyone to erase me either. Her voice hardened. You're overreacting. I did what had to be done. You're serving the country. I'm serving the family. That's how we both honor Mom and Dad. I let that sentence hang there, because it was perfect in its arrogance. I could almost picture her sitting in Mom's chair, the same one she swore she'd never sit in, probably wearing that smug blazer she always used for big moments. So I just said, got it. She hesitated. Got what? Your definition of family. Then I hung up. I sat there for a full minute, staring at the sand-covered tent floor. One of my teammates, Ruiz, walked by and said, You look like you just got hit by an email again. Worse, I said. A lawyer with my DNA. He whistled low. That's brutal. He wasn't wrong. Later that day, while double-checking cargo manifests, I caught myself spacing out. I kept hearing her tone, the polished calm, the superiority. Amanda always had a talent for sounding righteous while doing the exact opposite of what's right. When we were kids, she once switched our report cards before showing them to Dad. She got a week of praise. I got grounded. She called it strategy. I called it lying. Guess which definition Mom accepted? Now, all these years later, she'd done it again, just on a bigger scale, with more zeros attached. That night, I went outside the tent to catch some air. The stars in Afghanistan looked unreal bright enough to make you forget where you were for a minute. I remember Dad teaching us constellations in the backyard. Amanda used to make up her own names for them, while I memorized the real ones. Even then, we were wired differently. She wanted to control the story, and I just wanted the truth. The wind shifted, carrying that dry desert smell. I checked my watch. It was 2:15 a.m. in Tennessee. She was probably asleep in Mom's old house, our house. I imagined her there, walking through the hallway, touching the family photos, maybe even moving them around. She'd probably left mine on the wall, though. She liked symbols. Keeping me framed but powerless? That was exactly her style. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through our old messages. Before I left for deployment, she'd written, Proud of you, sis. Stay safe. Now it just read, like sarcasm, with good punctuation. I opened a new email, stared at the blank screen, and typed, Do not contact me again until you're ready to talk honestly. Then deleted it. There was no point. Amanda didn't understand honesty unless it was notarized. Instead, I forwarded the lawyer's email to my personal account and flagged it as evidence. Old habits from military training document everything. Trust no one. At dinner, Ruiz slid me an extra pack of instant mashed potatoes and said, You okay, Captain? Yeah, I said. Just learning that family politics makes war look easy. He grinned. Well, At least you get medals for this one, right? Maybe not medals, I said, but someone's gonna lose rank. He laughed. I didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the sound of Amanda's voice, the way she said temporary, like it was permanent. The way she justified betrayal as keeping things running. I stared at the tent ceiling until dawn, listening to the desert hum. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to call her again. I wasn't going to argue, cry, or beg. That wasn't who I was anymore. The next mission briefing came in at 0600. I put on my uniform, zipped up my jacket, and checked my weapon. Ruiz handed me a fresh radio pack and said, "We moving out?" "Yeah," I said. Time to focus. But in the back of my head, the war at home had already started. And unlike the one outside these gates, I wasn't planning to play defense. The heat hit like a punch the second I stepped outside the tent. The sky looked bruised gray and yellow swirling together, warning of another sandstorm. I tightened my scarf and pulled my cap lower, half hoping the wind would drown out my thoughts. Command had us running a convoy resupply down Highway 1 that day. Normally routine, but nothing feels routine when your head's full of family betrayal. Ruiz caught me staring into the distance and said, "You look like you're fighting two wars, Captain." He wasn't wrong. One was out here, in the dust. The other was 3 continents away, wearing a pearl necklace and rewriting my life. The Humvees kicked up walls of sand as we moved out. The desert blurred everything into one endless color. I stared at the horizon through the windshield, pretending I wasn't counting how many miles I was from Tennessee. Halfway through the route, we hit turbulence radio interference, wind howling so hard it sounded alive. I could feel the static buzz through my headset. Then a flash behind us, a detonation. Ruiz yelled, "Ide! Rear vehicle!" The ground shook. Smoke rolled into the sky. My training kicked in before fear could. Orders, movements, cover checks, it all happened on muscle memory. By the time the medevac arrived, one of our guys was gone. Afterward, when the dust settled and the paperwork began, the silence in my head came roaring back. Death has a way of shrinking everything else. But somehow, Amanda's voice still managed to cut through it. "You chose the army. I chose responsibility." I sat outside the medical tent, hands still shaking, watching the sunset smear orange across the dunes. I'd seen men die before, but this one hit differently. Maybe because I couldn't stop thinking that somewhere, at the same moment, Amanda was probably sipping wine, talking about how strong her sister was. That night, the wind howled so loud, the tent walls bent inward. Ruiz came by, dropped a canteen beside me, and said quietly, "You did everything right." "I know," I said. "You don't look like you believe it." I shrugged. "It's just funny how you can lose someone out here and still feel like you're losing something back home. End of prens." He nodded, then walked off without pressing. That's what good soldiers do. They don't ask about ghosts they can't see. I opened my laptop again, not sure why. Maybe I wanted distraction. Maybe I wanted control. The inbox was full of mission reports, supply logs, and one new email. No subject line, just, "From Amanda." I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. "Lauren, I heard from Mom's doctor. Her health isn't great. I'm managing things, but I could use your signature on a few documents to make the process smoother. Let me know when you can print and sign." No apology, no mention of what she'd done. Just signature and smoother, like she was talking to a contractor. I stared at the screen, jaw tight. She really thought I'd just sign away what was left of my name. Instead of replying, I saved the message and forwarded it to my secure drive. Then I copied her wording into my notebook. Every lawyer leaves a paper trail, and Amanda wasn't as clever as she believed. Outside, the storm picked up again, sand slamming against metal like rain. I thought of Mom, frail, and probably too tired to even question what she'd signed. Amanda had always used guilt as her favorite tool, and now she was wielding it against a woman too weak to fight back. The tent flap burst open. Ruiz ducked inside, face wrapped in a scarf. "Storm's hitting harder. Command says to hunker down until morning." Got it," I said. He glanced at my laptop. "You writing a report?" "Something like that." He smirked. You type like you're planning a lawsuit. I didn't answer. He wasn't entirely wrong. Hours later, I couldn't sleep. The sand hitting the canvas sounded like static on a broken radio. I lay there, thinking about Amanda's email. The words signature and process kept looping in my head like orders from someone who thought I'd still follow them. I reached for my notebook and scribbled 3 lines. Check legal validity of power of attorney. Request copy of revised will. Confirm mom's medical capacity at time of signing. Old military habits die hard. You don't attack blindly, you gather intel first. Somewhere outside, the wind died down for a second, long enough to hear the faint hum of generators from the command post. I stared at the ceiling and felt that familiar focus settle in the one that comes right before a mission starts. Amanda might have thought distance meant silence, but she forgot something crucial. Soldiers don't need proximity to plan. I closed the notebook and whispered to no one in particular, "This isn't over." The next morning, the sun rose pale and unforgiving. We buried the soldier we lost under a sky so wide it could have swallowed us whole. The chaplain spoke. The wind blew, and for a moment, the world went still. When the ceremony ended, I stayed behind. I removed my cap, pressed it to my chest, and looked east toward home. I didn't cry. I just thought about how betrayal and loss felt eerily similar. You never really see them coming until the dust clears. As the convoy engine started again, Ruiz called out, "You ready, Captain?" I took one last look at the horizon. Yeah, ready. The Humvee door slammed shut behind me. I checked my sidearm, adjusted my vest, and exhaled slowly. By the time the tires hit the dirt, I wasn't thinking about Afghanistan anymore. I was thinking about Nashville, about forged documents, and about how some battles don't need guns, they just need proof. The wind had barely settled when I finally got a clear connection on the satellite line. The signal cracked, but the voice on the other end was solid. Daniel Ross, an old friend from my ROTC days who'd gone civilian and now worked for a regional bank in Nashville. He answered with his usual dry humor. "Captain Mitchell, haven't heard from you since you broke my nose during self-defense training." "That was self-defense," I said. "You grabbed the wrong arm." He laughed. "And you've still got the same tone. What's going on?" I told him everything in the clipped way soldiers talk when they're trying not to lose their temper. The will, the power of attorney, Amanda's new title as family gatekeeper. Daniel went quiet for a long second. Then he said, "Send me her email. I'll take a look at the property records. If she moved something under your mother's name, there'll be a trail." Within an hour, he called back. "You were right. She didn't just handle paperwork. She transferred the deed for the Mitchell property into a trust under her name, Green Family Holdings. Guess who signed as your mother's witness?" I didn't answer. "Her husband," Daniel said. "Textbook conflict of interest. The signature from your mom looks shaky too, probably signed while medicated. Or forged." My throat felt dry. "Send me everything you've got." He hesitated. "Lauren, I know you. You're about to go full tactical on this. Don't. Not yet. You need proof that sticks." "Odd," I said. "That's exactly what I'm doing." The file came through an hour later, PDF copies of transfer papers, dates, signatures, all neat and deliberate, the kind of fraud that hides behind etiquette. I sat there in the desert, scrolling through each line while dust stuck to my hands. My mother's signature, smooth and careful in every document before this one, suddenly turned uneven and wide. The pen pressure lighter. It wasn't her. Amanda had done it. No arguments left, no gray area, no misunderstanding. Just greed, framed as responsibility. By the time Ruiz returned from the command post, I'd already printed the pages and sealed them in a folder marked Personal Affairs. He looked at the title and raised an eyebrow. "Family trouble?" "Something like that," I said. He grinned. "You've got that look. The one before you blow up someone's plan without raising your voice." "Good," I said. "Because that's exactly the plan." That night, I sat outside the tent again, under a sky too big to feel fair. The stars here didn't care about property lines or signatures. They just burned. I pulled up the last voicemail Amanda had ever left me before I deployed her voice, soft, performative. "Stay safe, okay? I'll handle everything at home." Yeah, she handled it all right. I drafted another message, but this one wasn't polite. Don't contact me again about signatures. I'll handle things from here. I didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, I opened the secure folder on my laptop and created a new file. Operation Homefront. Phase 1. Evidence. Every soldier knows, before you strike, you gather intel. Before you confront, you make sure the truth can't be denied. The next morning, Command reassigned us to logistics coordination, which meant less patrol and more office work. Perfect. I spent every break running background checks through open databases, real estate transactions, trust fund filings, tax liens. It turned out Amanda wasn't just greedy, she was sloppy. She'd used her firm's notary seal on documents signed outside business hours, something that left a digital timestamp traceable through Tennessee's online system. By noon, I had it printed and highlighted. The exact minute she'd notarized Mom's updated, 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. But according to her firm's website, she was in a corporate ethics seminar in Atlanta that same afternoon. Is sloppy, Amanda? Real sloppy. I sent Daniel another message. Got her. Need a certified verification before I file anything. He replied fast. Already in progress. You still have that quiet temper, huh? Not temper, I wrote back. Discipline. When night fell, I didn't eat. I wasn't hungry. I just stared at the computer screen, the cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission to start the next phase. That's when an email popped up from Amanda again. Lauren, you've been distant. Mom's been asking about you. Please remember that family is about trust. Don't let your career make you forget who you are. Trust. She really used that word. I laughed once, out loud, in disbelief. Ruiz looked over and asked, "What's funny?" "My sister's giving me a lecture about honesty," I said. "That's like me teaching ballroom dancing." He snorted. "So, you gonna respond?" "Yeah," I said, opening a blank reply window. Then I typed, "I haven't forgotten who I am, Amanda, but you should start remembering who you were supposed to be." I hit send. Outside, the wind started to rise again. Soft at first, then strong enough to rattle the metal canteens hanging from the rack. I zipped up my jacket and stepped outside. The desert stretched endlessly in front of me, raw, unforgiving, and honest. The kind of place where truth survives, because nothing soft does. I looked at the horizon, at the faint line where night began to swallow the day, and said quietly to myself, "She forged my mother's name. She rewrote the will, but she forgot one thing: soldiers don't take orders from liars." Then I turned off the lantern and walked back into the tent, the folder of evidence tucked under my arm, already planning what came next. The first thing I did when my plane touched down in Colorado was take a deep breath that didn't taste like sand. The air felt wrong, too clean, too soft, but I needed it. I'd been cleared for early leave after the convoy attack. Technically, it was recovery time. In reality, I had another mission waiting back home. I rented a used Ford at the airport. The guy at the counter looked at my uniform and said, "Welcome home." I nodded. It didn't feel like home yet. The drive from Fort Carson to Tennessee was long enough for every emotion to take a turn. Anger, regret, focus, then back to anger again. I didn't listen to music. Just the road noise. I needed my mind quiet enough to think like a soldier, not a sister. When I finally crossed into Tennessee, the sky looked exactly like it had before I left: gray, humid, heavy with memory. The kind of sky that smelled like storms and old arguments. The Mitchell property sat at the end of a long gravel road that hadn't changed in 20 years. But the house itself had. Amanda's husband's car, a shiny black Tesla, was parked out front, the kind of thing that screamed, "New money, old guilt." I didn't knock. I didn't even get out of the car. I just sat there, watching the porch light flicker on as the motion sensor caught me. Then the front door opened. Amanda stepped out, holding a wine glass. She didn't look surprised. "Lauren," she said, smiling like this was some reunion dinner. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said. "War ended." "And?" "Congratulations," she said, sipping the wine. "You must be exhausted." "I am," I said, "but not from war." Her smile twitched for half a second, then snapped back. Look, I know you're upset about the paperwork, but stop calling it paperwork, I said. My tone was calm, but it carried enough steel to cut through the Tennessee humidity. You forged Mom's signature. You took the house. You moved the assets. Don't insult me with office terms. She blinked, eyes narrowing. You think you know everything because you read a few PDFs? No, I said. I know everything because you're predictable. She exhaled hard, setting the wine down on the porch rail. You left. I stayed. I took care of her. You can't claim to love someone from a combat zone. I almost laughed. So that's your defense? Emotional proximity? Don't twist it, she snapped. You chose that uniform over your family. I took a step closer, boots crunching on gravel. That uniform paid for Mom's medical bills when you couldn't. That uniform built the discipline you've never had. Don't talk to me about choices. She looked away, muttering something about stress, about misunderstanding, but I'd stopped listening. There's a sound people make when they know they're caught. It's halfway between anger and fear. That's what I heard. Before she could recover, I said, "Where's Mom?" Her head snapped up. She's resting. Where? In a care facility. She's comfortable. It's private. Which one? She hesitated too long. I didn't need her to answer. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit record. Say the name of the facility, Amanda. Her lips parted. You're not serious. I'm dead serious, I said. Because if she's in some underfunded home while you're drinking out here, we've got a real problem. She didn't say anything, just stared at me. Thought so, I said, turning back to the car. She called out, Lauren, don't make this ugly. We're family. I stopped, hand on the door handle. We were family, I said. Now we're just related. The door shut hard enough to shake the mirror. I drove off, leaving her standing in the yellow porch light, one hand still clutching the wine glass like it was proof of control. I didn't head to a hotel. I didn't go to a friend's place. I drove until I found a cheap roadside motel, just off the interstate, one of those places where the carpet smells like bleach, and the front desk clerk doesn't ask questions. Perfect. I sat on the bed with my laptop, opened my folder of evidence, and added a new note. Step 2. Verify mother's condition and location. Document neglect. The plan wasn't about emotion anymore. It was logistics. I ordered takeout, stared at the TV without hearing it, and checked my reflection in the dark window. My face looked tired, but calm. That kind of calm that scares people who've underestimated you. At 11:47 p.m., I got a text from Daniel. Got confirmation. Amanda transferred medical authority too. You'll need to act fast. I typed back. Already on it. Then another text came in from an unknown number. No name. Just a message. Lauren, please don't make this worse. Mom doesn't need stress. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need to guess. I stared at the words, then hit delete. The next morning, I packed my things, grabbed my keys, and looked at the map. There were 15 licensed nursing facilities in the county. I planned to visit every single one until I found her. The GPS voice told me to turn east, toward the small towns where the good homes cost more than Amanda would ever pay. The sun was already high, blinding through the windshield. For the first time since I'd landed, I smiled. If Amanda wanted to play power games, she'd forgotten one small fact: military operations always start with reconnaissance. By the time I reached the second nursing home, I'd already seen enough beige walls and fake smiles to last a lifetime. The staff at the first place had looked at me like I was crazy when I asked about my mother. At the second one, the clerk hesitated before saying, Mitchell? Yes, she's here. Room 214. Oh. The hallway smelled like bleach and something worse, hopelessness, maybe. I passed a line of old TVs playing daytime game shows, each louder than the last. Mom hated that kind of noise. She used to call it sound for people who stopped listening. I found room 214 at the end of the hall. The door was open just enough to see her. She was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, staring at a garden that didn't look alive. Her hair was thinner, her skin pale. She looked 10 years older than when I left. Mom? I said quietly. She turned her head slowly, eyes squinting as if trying to match the voice to a memory. Then her expression changed shock first, then warmth. Lauren? Yeah, it's me. She tried to stand, but I rushed forward. Don't, Mom. It's okay. Sit. She grabbed my hand with a strength that didn't match her frame. They said you weren't coming back. Who said that? Amanda. She said you were too busy. Said you didn't want to deal with any of this. I felt something tighten in my chest. She lied. Mom nodded like she'd already guessed but needed to hear it anyway. I thought so. There were papers on the bedside table, bills, forms, a copy of the same power of attorney. Amanda had used to take everything. I picked it up, reading the lines. The signature was Mom's, but her hand trembled as she watched me read. I didn't understand what I was signing, she said. She told me it was medical paperwork. I just trusted her. I set the paper down carefully. She took your house, Mom, and she's been using your name to move money. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She said she was saving it for you, that you didn't want to be involved. I knelt beside her. She's been lying to both of us. Mom looked down, hands twisting together. Your father always said Amanda had your ambition and my charm. Turns out that's a dangerous mix. End of chapter 12. I tried to smile, but it didn't stick. Don't worry, I'm going to fix this. She squeezed my hand. Don't do anything reckless. Mom, I'm a soldier. Reckless is usually a line item on my job description. That got a small laugh out of her, quiet but real. It reminded me that she was still in there, the woman who raised me to keep my word, even when it hurt. A nurse walked in carrying a clipboard. Captain Mitchell, right? Your sister left instructions that we should contact her if you show up. I turned. You just did. She blinked. Excuse me? You can tell her I'm aware of her instructions. And while you're at it, note that this facility is understaffed, underfunded, and under investigation, starting tomorrow morning. The nurse froze, not sure if I was serious. I gave her my calmest professional smile, the one that said try me. After she left, Mom whispered, You shouldn't make enemies. I'm not making enemies, I said. I'm documenting them. I spent the next 2 hours taking photos, medication logs, facility records, condition reports. Amanda had signed off on the care plan as financial guardian. Every detail screamed neglect disguised as efficiency. When I was done, Mom was dozing in her chair. I kissed her forehead and stepped out quietly. At the front desk, the receptionist tried to hand me a visitor's badge for next time. I said, There won't be a next time. She's leaving here soon. Back in the car, I called Daniel. Found her. She's alive but in bad shape. You still got that contact at Valor Legal Network? Yeah. You're thinking lawsuit? I'm thinking something bigger. Legal exposure. He paused. Lauren, that's war talk. Then call it a tactical correction. I hung up and checked my rearview mirror. A silver SUV pulled out from the side lot a few seconds after I did. My gut told me exactly whose car it was. I slowed at a red light, and the SUV slowed too. I didn't panic. I just smiled, reached for my phone, and took a picture of the rear plate. Then I drove straight to a gas station, parked under a security camera, and waited. The SUV turned off down another road. Coward move. When I finally got back on the interstate, I rolled the window down and let the air hit me. The Tennessee hills stretched out around me, green, familiar, and suddenly small. Amanda had always underestimated me because I didn't shout, didn't play politics, didn't fight dirty. But she'd forgotten one thing about people trained in command. We don't improvise emotions. We execute plans. I pulled into a motel, grabbed a pen, and opened my notebook. At the top of a new page, I wrote, Operation Homefront. Phase 2. Extraction and exposure. Below it, I added 3 bullet points. E. Remove Mom from care facility. 2. Verify all forged documents. 3. Secure legal representation through Valor. I stared at the list until it looked like orders. Then I drew a small box next to each one. By morning, those boxes wouldn't be empty. The next morning started with rain, that slow Tennessee kind that makes the world look like it's under interrogation lights. I took it as a good sign. Rain cleans the air before the storm hits. By 8 a.m., I was walking into the Valor Legal Network office in downtown Nashville. The building looked ordinary from the outside, red brick, Small brass plaque, but the inside was military clean. No motivational posters, no free coffee machine, just sharp people who used to serve and still acted like it. The receptionist, a tall woman in her 40s with Marine posture, nodded when I said my name. Captain Mitchell, we've been expecting you. Haven't to. She led me down a hallway lined with framed photos of veterans in uniform, shaking hands with judges. At the end sat Major Davis, or, technically, former Major Davis, Army JAG Corps, now senior partner at Valor. He stood when I walked in. At ease, Captain, he said, half smiling. I hear you've got a situation that smells like command-level family drama. Worse, I said, shaking his hand. It smells like white-collar treason. That earned a low chuckle. Then let's get to work. All. I handed him my folder, every piece of paper, every photo from the nursing home, and the notarized power of attorney Amanda had used. He flipped through it silently, the kind of silence only military lawyers have, the kind that weighs evidence instead of emotion. Finally, he looked up. She forged the signature, no doubt. I've seen 1,000 of these. The shaky hand, the witness overlap, the timestamp mismatch, it's textbook fraud. But she did it under a power of attorney that your mother supposedly authorized while lucid. That complicates things. Complicated I can handle, I said. Impossible, I can't. He leaned back. Tell me what you want. I want the property back in my mother's name. I want Amanda stripped of authority, and I want the truth on record. He nodded slowly. You don't want revenge. You want restoration. Revenge is messy, I said. I prefer accuracy. He smiled. Good answer. Here's how we'll do it. He pulled a legal pad toward him and began outlining the plan. First, we secure emergency guardianship. That lets us pull your mother out of that facility without Amanda's consent. Second, we file a petition for forensic handwriting analysis. If we prove the signature is forged, the power of attorney becomes invalid retroactively. Third, we go for asset recovery. Translation, I said. We starve the enemy before we attack. Exactly, he said. You've studied Ziga tactics. Lived them. He looked up. Then you'll understand this next part. Don't confront her yet. You'll get one shot at exposure. Make sure it counts. I nodded. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to control. Not peace, but order. When we finished, I signed 3 sets of papers. Davis slid the last one across the desk. This gives me full authority to act on your behalf. Once I file this, your sister won't even know you've moved until the judge signs the order. I picked up the pen, paused for half a second, then signed. Let's make it official. He extended a hand again. Welcome to Operation Homefront, Captain. Walking out of the office, I passed a young paralegal organizing case files. She looked up and smiled politely. Her name tag read, Maggie Torres. Something about the name hit me. My mother had a nurse named Maggie once, back when she was still healthy. The memory grounded me. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving everything sharp and bright. I stopped by a small coffee stand on the corner and ordered a black coffee. The barista handed it over with a cheerful, "Stay dry out there." I took one sip, grimaced, and muttered, "Too late." I drove back to the motel and opened my notebook again. Next to each of the 3 boxes I'd written the night before, I drew a check mark. Then I added a 4th line. Step 4. Psychological operation, destabilize her confidence. Amanda's greatest weapon was arrogance. People like her collapse not from exposure but from doubt. You make them question their control, and they unravel themselves. I started small. I called the nursing home pretending to be a reporter confirming information for a veteran care review. The director sounded nervous immediately. Within an hour, Amanda texted me. Why are people calling about Mom's facility? What are you doing, Lauren? I replied. Just making sure she's getting the care she deserves. Transparency's healthy. 5 minutes later, 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. She didn't reply. Perfect. By evening, Davis sent an update. Judge granted temporary guardianship. Pickup can happen tomorrow morning. Bring ID and proof of relation. I too main. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Then I called Mom. She sounded tired, but lighter when she heard my voice. Are you still in town? Yeah, I said. And tomorrow you're coming home. There was silence. Then a soft, disbelieving laugh. You always did make good on your word. I learned from the best, I said. When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the half-empty cup of coffee on the table. The motel light buzzed overhead, steady and cold. For the first time, I felt the exhaustion hit. It wasn't the kind that sleep fixes. It was the kind that comes from years of fighting battles you didn't start. I leaned back against the wall, eyes open, mind still running through the plan. Every move was lined up now. Extraction, evidence, exposure. All that was left was execution. And Amanda had no idea the first domino had already fallen. The courthouse elevator doors opened with that old metallic groan that reminded me of base transport lifts. Different battlefield, same sound. I'd met Major Davis earlier that morning to sign the guardianship transfer. By noon, my mother was officially free from Amanda's care. The plan was airtight. The new facility, St. Bridget's home, was clean, bright, and run by people who didn't treat patients like paperwork. Mom cried when I told her she was moving. You don't need to do this, Lauren, she'd said. I smiled. It's not a favor, Mom. It's a correction. By 3 p.m., she was settled in her new room, surrounded by sunlight and clean linens that actually smelled like soap. I left her watching a daytime show and headed straight for downtown Nashville again. There was one more stop to make before I drove back to my motel. Amanda's law office. I wasn't there to fight. Not yet. I was there to deliver a message. Her firm, Green and Wallace LLP, occupied the 12th floor of a glass building that looked far too sleek for the kind of moral rot I knew lived inside. The receptionist tried to stop me at the front desk. Do you have an appointment? She asked. Yeah, I said, flashing my military ID. It's called an audit. Something in my tone worked, because she just blinked and pointed to the hallway. Third door on the right. Aye. Amanda was in her office, pretending to read something on her computer when I walked in. Her eyes flicked up, and I saw at that flicker of surprise she tried to hide under a smirk. Well, she said, crossing her arms. This is dramatic. What, did you come to arrest me? No, I said, stepping closer. Just to warn you. About what? About how fast a signature can destroy a career. She laughed. You really think you can scare me with your soldier talk? This isn't Afghanistan, Lauren. It's Tennessee. We play by real rules here. That's funny, I said, because last time I checked, forgery and elder abuse are still illegal under both state and federal law. Her jaw tightened. You're bluffing. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. This is a forensic analysis request filed under your name and Mom's. In about 72 hours, the county clerk will verify those signatures. When that happens, the document you built your entire theft on disappears. She tried to sound calm, but her voice slipped. You wouldn't dare. I smiled. You're confusing me with you. I don't bluff. Amanda stood up from her desk, trying to tower over me. You think anyone's going to believe a war vet over a practicing attorney? Let's test that, I said, laying the envelope on her desk. This isn't war, Amanda. This is paperwork. End close. For a second, silence hung heavy in the air like the quiet before a detonation. She sat back down, eyes darting to the envelope as if it might burn a hole through her desk. You're making a mistake, she finally said. Probably, I replied, turning toward the door. But I'll make it legally. As I walked out, she called after me, her voice sharper than before. You always had to be the hero, didn't you? Couldn't stand that someone else had control. I stopped in the doorway, half turning. You don't understand control, Amanda. It's not about power, it's about restraint. Her mouth opened to respond, but I was already gone. Outside, the rain had returned. I stood on the sidewalk watching the city lights smear through the wet glass like someone had painted over the truth. My phone buzzed. It was Davis. Signature analysis already moving faster than expected. Clerks cooperating. Be ready for blowback. Blowback was fine. It meant the plan was working. That night, at the motel, I laid out all the evidence on the bed. Forged signatures, medical records, texts from the care facility, bank transfers under Amanda's authorization. It looked less like family paperwork and more like a criminal brief. At 9:12 p.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Lauren Mitchell," a male voice said. "Speaking. This is Deputy Carlson, Davidson County Sheriff's Office. Your sister called in a harassment complaint. Said you threatened her at her workplace today." I exhaled slowly. "Did she mention why I was there?" "She said you're trying to intimidate her." I could almost hear Amanda's smirk through the phone line. "Deputy," I said calmly, "did she also mention that I'm the legal guardian for our mother as of this morning?" He paused. "No, ma'am." "Then maybe you should check your system before wasting taxpayer gas. Good evening." I hung up. Predictable. Amanda was panicking. That was the first sign she was losing control. By midnight, I had everything filed, labeled, and stored on an encrypted drive. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey from the bottle I'd bought on the way back, a bad habit from deployment that had somehow turned into ritual. I sat on the bed, staring at the folder labeled Operation Homefront, Phase 3. The word exposure sat underlined across the top. My father used to say, "When people lie long enough, they stop fearing the truth. You have to reintroduce it like a shock." That's what tomorrow would be. A controlled detonation. And I was very good at timing explosions. The courthouse lobby felt colder than usual that morning. Maybe it was the air conditioning, or maybe it was the kind of chill that comes from knowing the next few hours could rewrite everything. I adjusted my uniform jacket, smoothed the creases, and stepped inside. People turned when they saw me. You'd be surprised how fast a courtroom changes tone when a military officer walks in full dress uniform. It wasn't for drama, it was for truth. The uniform wasn't decoration, it was documentation. Proof that I didn't run from hard things. Amanda was already there, standing by her attorney. Her suit screamed money, but her eyes screamed exhaustion. She glanced at me, pretending to be calm, but her grip on that coffee cup was so tight it might have cracked. Major Davis met me by the bench. "You ready for this, Captain?" "Always," I said. "But I won't lie. I'd rather be on a tarmac in Kabul." He smirked. "Different kind of war. Same objective, hold the line." The judge entered. Everyone stood. I didn't look at Amanda again. I didn't need to. I could feel her discomfort from across the room. The clerk called the case. Mitchell versus Green. Petition to nullify power of attorney and contest fraudulent transfer of estate assets. The words hung in the air like an accusation from God himself. Davis went first. Calm, precise, no theatrics. "Your Honor, my client, Captain Lauren Mitchell, has returned from active duty to find her family estate stripped under false pretense. The defense claims authorization through a power of attorney signed by their mother, Mrs. Evelyn Mitchell. We will show the signature was falsified, the documents manipulated, and the estate misappropriated by attorney Amanda Green for personal gain." Holoples. Amanda's lawyer, a man named Carter with the face of someone who bills by the second, stood up. "Objection to character implication. My client acted in accordance with state law and family agreement." The judge, a short woman with sharp eyes, waved a hand. "You'll have your turn, Mr. Carter. Proceed, Major." Davis clicked the remote, and a screen behind him lit up. Two documents appeared side by side, the power of attorney Amanda had filed, and Mom's verified medical consent form from a year prior. Even from where I sat, the difference in handwriting was obvious. Davis pointed with his pen. "Forensic analysis confirms these signatures were not executed by the same hand." Additionally, the witness listed on the POA document, one Margaret Hale, has provided a sworn statement she never signed or witnessed this paperwork. Carter stood again. Disparity. "Handwriting analysis is not definitive evidence of fraud, Your Honor." "Perhaps not," Davis said smoothly. "But bank transfers under your client's name, totaling $126,000 from her mother's account after that same date are." Amanda's face flushed red. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering something urgent. The judge looked unimpressed. "Miss Green, would you like to respond?" Amanda straightened her posture. "Your Honor, I managed our mother's finances because my sister was overseas. She relinquished that responsibility years ago. I only did what was best for our family. I stood before Davis could stop me. With all due respect, ma'am, I said, facing the judge. I never relinquished anything. I was serving my country. That doesn't make me an absentee daughter, it makes me someone who trusted her family not to weaponize my absence. The courtroom went silent. Even the air conditioner seemed to pause. The judge leaned forward. Captain Mitchell, you're not required to speak. I know, I said, but I needed to. I sat down, and Davis gave me a small nod that said, well said. Then came the hardest part. Davis called Mom's nurse from the previous facility to testify. She was soft-spoken but firm. She described how Amanda reduced Mom's care level to minimum medical necessity and authorized cost-cutting on medication. The photos Davis displayed next of Mom's neglected condition were enough to make even the clerk look away. When the judge asked Amanda if she wanted to comment, she simply said, I didn't know. Lies are easy to tell until they echo in a room where truth has a microphone. By 11:30, Davis rested his case. The defense tried a closing argument about misunderstanding, but even the gallery wasn't buying it. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was steady, final, and quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a verdict before it's said. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds the power of attorney filed under Miss Green's name invalid and fraudulent. Guardianship of Mrs. Evelyn Mitchell will remain with Captain Lauren Mitchell. Assets wrongfully transferred will be restored to the estate. Miss Green, your conduct will be referred to the Tennessee Bar Association for review. I make. Amanda froze. Her mouth opened like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. Davis gathered the papers calmly. Permission to exit, Your Honor? Granted, the judge said, tapping her gavel once. As we walked out, the hallway felt different. Brighter, somehow. A couple of people nodded at me as I passed strangers who didn't know my story, but recognized what justice looks like when it finally breathes. Outside, Davis turned to me. You did good in there, Captain. She's my sister, I said. There's nothing good about it. He nodded. No, but there's something right about it. We shook hands, and I walked down the courthouse steps into the Tennessee Sunday. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom's new facility. Mrs. Mitchell asked if her daughters made peace. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. One of us did. And? The breeze lifted a strand of hair across my face, and for the first time since stepping off that plane from Afghanistan, I felt grounded, not victorious, not vengeful, just steady. And steady was enough. I didn't plan on driving past Amanda's office that afternoon, but traffic pushed me down the same street. Her firm's logo, green and Wallace LLP, was still gleaming on the glass, but something new was taped to the door. Under investigation, Tennessee Bar Association. I parked across the street and watched as a man in a navy suit removed the firm's nameplate with a screwdriver. Poetic, really. Lawyers spend their lives building walls of words, but all it takes is a single truth to tear one down. The courthouse verdict had only been an hour ago, and the shockwaves were already spreading. Davis had warned me this part would be ugly lawsuits, press inquiries, professional fallout. But watching Amanda's empire collapse in real time felt quieter than I expected. Not satisfying, not painful, just quiet. At a red light, my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from an unknown number. I hit play. Lauren, it's Amanda. I hope you're proud. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I've lost everything because of you. I hope Mom knows what kind of daughter she raised. The message ended with her breathing hard into the phone, like she wanted to say more but didn't know what could possibly hurt me now. I replayed it once, then deleted it. By evening, the story was already online. Headline: Attorney suspended for elder fraud allegations. The article didn't use our full names, but the local crowd didn't need it. Nashville gossip fills blanks faster than any journalist ever could. I didn't comment. I didn't even read the comments section. People would say what they always say. Family drama, inheritance greed, another scandal, but they weren't there when Mom was sitting in that dim nursing home, thinking her daughters had forgotten her. That night, I visited Mom again. St. Bridget's was peaceful, soft lighting, faint piano music from the common room, nurses who smiled for real. She was awake when I walked in, reading a paperback she'd probably already read 100 times. She looked up. You did it, didn't you? I pulled up a chair. You heard? Everyone's heard, she said. One of the nurses showed me the article. I sighed. I didn't want you to find out that way. Mom smiled faintly. I already knew how it would end. You were born fighting for what's right. Amanda was born fighting to be right. That hit deeper than I expected. I reached for her hand. I didn't want to destroy her, Mom. I just wanted the truth back. I know, she said softly. But truth has a habit of destroying what can't survive it. For a moment, we sat in silence. The rain outside tapped against the window, steady and calm. Do you hate her? Mom asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. But I don't recognize her anymore. Mom nodded, like she'd been expecting that answer. You're still her sister, Lauren. You always will be. Just not the way you were. I stayed until she fell asleep, then kissed her forehead before leaving. Back in the hallway, one of the nurses caught up to me. Captain Mitchell, she said quietly. Your mother's been asking to plant a small garden outside her window. She said she wants something living to take care of again. I smiled. Tell her I'll bring the seeds. The drive back to the motel was uneventful until I noticed a car following me, again a black sedan this time. Amanda's paranoia had probably turned mutual. I took 3 turns through side streets, confirmed it wasn't following, then parked by the motel sign. Davis called right as I stepped out of the car. Press is calling for comment, he said. Want me to handle it? Yeah, I said. Keep it short. Just say justice was served. He chuckled. That's all you want to say? Let the story talk. I'm done talking. Inside, I poured another glass of whiskey and sat by the window. The motel neon buzzed faintly, throwing red light across the notebook still lying open from the night before. I flipped to a clean page and wrote at the top, Phase 4, Stabilization. Rebuild quietly. No headlines, no vengeance. Just order. I underlined order. Then I added a smaller note under it. Forgiveness optional. Peace mandatory. The next morning, I woke early. Habit, not insomnia. Old soldiers don't really sleep. We just recharge between missions. Outside, a newspaper sat at the door. The headline was small but clean. Veteran wins legal battle against fraudulent family estate transfer. There was a quote from Davis. She didn't fight for revenge. She fought for restoration. That part, he got exactly right. Later that day, I stopped by the courthouse again, not for paperwork, but to return Mom's ring that had been in evidence custody. The clerk handed it to me in a small velvet pouch. I slipped it into my pocket and headed to the park across the street. The city was unusually quiet for a Friday afternoon. Kids played by the fountain, traffic moved slow, sunlight hit the courthouse dome like a medal. I sat on a bench and looked at the ring in my hand. Mom's initials were engraved inside, along with a date, the 17th of August 1983, the year she'd opened her first business, the year she'd built everything Amanda tried to steal. I turned it in my palm for a while, then put it back in the pouch. That ring wasn't about wealth, it was about work, about pride. Amanda would probably never understand that. As I stood to leave, I passed a young woman pushing a stroller. She smiled and said, "Thank you for your service." It's a phrase you hear a lot in uniform. Most days it feels routine, but today it landed different. Because this time, it wasn't about the army, it was about family. And for once, I felt like I'd finally brought someone home. The first morning I woke up without a battle plan felt strange. For the first time in months, there was no court date to attend, no statement to file, no fraud to expose. Just quiet. And quiet, I realized, is its own kind of victory. I drove out to St. Bridget's early, coffee in hand, to surprise Mom with breakfast. She was already sitting up, reading the local paper. Her glasses were slipping down her nose, and she was frowning at an article she couldn't quite admit she was proud of. She looked up when she saw me. "You're early." "End of fru. I figured I'd beat visiting hours," I said, setting down the coffee in a small box from the florist. "What's that?" she asked. "Seeds," I said. "You mentioned wanting a garden." Her expression softened. "You remembered." "I remember everything," I said, pulling a small spade and gloves out of the box. "You're getting your wish." We planted them together that morning: basil, rosemary, a few flowers she liked. The nurses watched from the window as I knelt in the dirt beside my mother, uniform sleeves rolled up, pressing roots into the soil. It wasn't ceremony. It wasn't redemption. It was just work. Honest work. Mom looked at me when we finished. "You know," she said quietly, "you could turn this into something." I wiped my hands. "Into what?" "Something that helps people like you," she said. "Women who come home and have to rebuild. You don't need to stay angry to stay useful." "And do what?" The sentence sat with me all day. Later that afternoon, Davis called. "You've been getting attention," he said. "A local paper wants to do a feature on your case. Veterans outreach programs are asking if you'll speak." "About what?" I asked. "About surviving 2 wars," he said. "One overseas, one at home." I laughed softly. "I'm not much of a motivational speaker, Major." "Maybe not," he said. "But you're something better, a witness." That word stuck. Witness. By the time I left St. Brigid's, the garden was already catching sunlight, tiny green shoots beginning to push through. It felt like an order had been fulfilled, not by rank or command, but by peace. 2 weeks later, I met with Davis again at Valor Legal. He had a stack of files waiting for me, cases of veterans dealing with family exploitation, fraudulent trusteeships, and lost estates. He slid them across the table. "I thought you might want to see what comes next," he said. "What am I looking at?" "Opportunities," he said. "There's a grant opening for a veterans nonprofit: financial literacy, estate recovery, legal guidance. We could partner with the Department of Defense Outreach Wing, but it would need a founder." I raised an eyebrow. "You're looking at her." He smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." And that's how the Mitchell Foundation for Women in Service was born. The first few weeks were chaos: paperwork, interviews, funding approvals, but it was the kind of chaos I liked. Structured, purposeful, clean. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was building something that would make revenge unnecessary. I rented a small office above a coffee shop near the courthouse. The walls were bare at first, just a flag folded neatly on a shelf and Mom's garden photo pinned to the corkboard. I printed the mission statement myself: to protect, empower, and rebuild the lives of women who served and those they care for, because silence should never be a weapon against them. Within a month, donations started coming in. Some small, some anonymous, one from a retired colonel who simply wrote, "For the battles we don't talk about." Every time a new letter arrived, I thought of Amanda, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She had used power to isolate. I was using mine to connect. That was the difference between control and command. One morning, I was sorting mail when the receptionist buzzed. "Captain Mitchell, someone here to see you." I stepped into the lobby and froze. Amanda was standing there. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but the kind of small that comes after a long fight you didn't win. She wore no makeup, no pretense. Just a simple black coat and eyes that looked exhausted. "I heard you started a foundation," she said. I nodded. "Word gets around." She took a slow breath. I wanted to say, "I didn't mean for things to go that far." "That's the problem," I said. "You never think it'll go that far until it does." She looked at the floor. "Mom won't answer my calls." "She will eventually," I said. "She's still healing." "And you?" she asked. "I'm working," I said simply. "That's what I do." Amanda nodded, like she knew there was no apology that could fix what she'd broken. "I'm sorry, Lauren." "Oh, bae. I didn't say I forgive you. I just said, take care of yourself." She left quietly, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger in her absence, just relief. That night, I visited the garden again. Mom was there, watering the plants with her usual precision, humming under her breath. "They're growing," she said. "Yeah," I said. "They are." She looked at me, smiling faintly. "So are you." "Him?" We stood there for a while in the late evening light, the kind that turns everything gold before it fades. I realized then that this was the real end of it. Not the courtroom, not the headlines, but this simple stillness. The kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It just shows up and stays. The morning of the ceremony, I almost didn't go. I wasn't one for medals or public recognition. They never tell the whole story anyway. Medals don't show the sleepless nights or the conversations that break families apart. But when Mom called and said, "I want to see you walk across that stage," that was enough reason. It was a small event veterans, families, a few local officials held at the Nashville Civic Hall. Nothing flashy. The kind of place where real stories hide behind polite applause. The announcer read off names while I stood in line, hands folded behind my back, uniform pressed sharp. When they called mine, I walked up, accepted the Meritorious Service Medal, and saluted. The applause was steady but distant in my ears. What I heard instead was my mother's voice from the front row, soft but certain. "That's my daughter." After the ceremony, people came up to shake my hand, ask questions, thank me for my service. I answered politely but briefly. I wasn't there to talk about combat. Afghanistan was just geography. The real war had been at home, and I'd won it without firing a single shot. Mom waited by the exit, wearing her favorite blue scarf. "You looked beautiful," she said. I smiled. "You mean disciplined." She laughed, and for the first time in years, it sounded light. "Same thing to me." We left the building together, walking into the late afternoon light. Outside, the sun hit the glass buildings across the street, reflecting gold like 100 quiet fireworks. I offered her my arm, and she took it. "I got you something," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh? Another lawsuit?" I laughed. "Better." I reached into my bag and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a printed photo of her garden, now thriving, surrounded by a few women from my foundation. One of them, a single mom and army mechanic, was teaching Mom how to prune basil. "They call it Evelyn's garden," I said. "We grow the herbs, sell them locally, and the proceeds go to help female veterans find housing." She stared at the picture, her hand trembling slightly. "You made something good out of all this." "You did too," I said. "You raised 2 daughters who proved what truth can do. One the hard way, one the honest way." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "I'm proud of you, Lauren. I just wish your father could see this." "He can," I said quietly. "He'd call it a clean mission." "Oh." We stopped by a food truck near the park, her idea. She ordered lemonade. I got black coffee, and we sat on a bench facing the courthouse across the street. Funny how the same building that once felt like a battlefield now just looked like part of the skyline. A few passers-by recognized me from the newspaper story. One woman stopped to shake my hand. "You're the veteran who helped her mom, right?" she said. "You did good." I smiled. "Just doing my job. I can." After she left, Mom said, "You know, you can stop saying that now. This isn't duty anymore. This is life." She was right. Somewhere between the courtrooms, the paperwork, and the garden, I'd stopped fighting and started living. As the sun began to dip, Davis called. "Big day, Captain. Congratulations." "Thanks," I said. "But you know I don't do celebrations." He chuckled. "Then at least enjoy the peace. You earned it." I looked at Mom beside me, sipping lemonade with a satisfied grin. "Yeah," I said. "For once I think I will." After the call, we stayed a while longer. Mom talked about moving into a small house closer to the garden, maybe teaching a few classes for the younger women. I told her about the next foundation project, financial literacy workshops, job programs, maybe even legal scholarships for veterans' families. The plans sounded practical, but beneath them was something bigger: continuity, legacy, the kind of quiet power that outlasts betrayal. When I finally drove her home, she leaned over before getting out of the car and said, "You know, you never told me what you said to your sister the last time you saw her." I smiled faintly. "I didn't say much, just take care of yourself." Mom nodded. "That's more mercy than most people would have given." "I wasn't merciful," I said. "I was done." We said goodnight, and I watched her walk up the steps to her porch, steady, unshaken. That image alone was worth more than any medal pinned on my chest. Later, back at my apartment, I placed the medal on the shelf next to the framed foundation charter. For a second, I just stared at it, the medal catching the light, the ribbon perfectly straight. It didn't look like victory. It looked like closure. On the wall behind it hung a photo of the foundation's first day. 10 women standing in front of a banner that said, "Restoration through Service." I'd chosen that phrase deliberately. Revenge shouts, restoration whispers, and I'd learned to trust the whisper. I stepped out onto the balcony as the sky turned a deep amber. The city was quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. I thought about everything that had led me here. Amanda's greed, Mom's silence, my own anger, and how it all folded into this moment of stillness. People think revenge ends with destruction. It doesn't. It ends with repair. It ends when you build something worth more than what they tried to take. The last light of the day hit the metal just right, casting a reflection on the wall that looked like fire at first glance, but it wasn't. It was sunlight, warm, patient, steady. Mom used to say, "Honor isn't loud. It just stays when everything else leaves." She was right. They cut me out of the will. They underestimated silence. And in the end, silence was the sound of honor. If you've ever been through betrayal, you know it's not the anger that saves you. It's what you do after the anger fades. That quiet rebuilding that's real revenge. And if you want to hear more real stories like this about cheating, betrayal, and the kind of revenge that doesn't need to scream, make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below. I read every story, every message. Because somewhere out there, your story might be the next one someone needs to hear.